In the games industry, every so often something comes by that really defines the era. For example, all MMOs changed when World of Warcraft was released. We were in the era of World of Warcraft being the standard for games. Things like Dark Souls would come out, leading us to look at Souls-like being an entire genre and having the benchmark be something like Dark Souls or Elden Ring for a lot of games. And we've hit another benchmark right now with the release of Mixtape, which is a 10 out of 10 across the board, an amazing title for everyone that is a games journalist, and that's just about it. Just games journalists. Hey gang, so I'm a little late to the Mixtape conversation, but it is technically a game, first off, and there's kind of a lot to unpack there. I kind of want to just look at some of the key moments, not so much to go over a full review because, you know, it's only like 3 hours long, like 2.5 hours if you're really just like going through the whole title. It has next to no gameplay, and I think it would be a pretty unimpressive title that no one talked about had it not been for these massively positive reviews from all these games journalists that came out, and they were saying this was it resonated with them so much and how it was so great. And a lot of the conversation came to being, was this something that they genuinely believed, or was this something that they were being told that they needed to review because of the people that were publishing the game? I think it's Annapurna something. It's like the fifth richest guy's daughter made a game studio that's like super, I mean, you would call it woke, basically, as much as I hate that word. But here we are. Everyone's talking about it, saying how it's not a game. Journalists are trying to like double down and be like, no, but I actually loved it like a ton. And I would like to start out with talking a little bit about visual novels, one of my favorite types of games. Most people would not consider visual novels to be a game at all. I think if someone were to say, hey, you know, Oj, what's one of your favorite games, like a 10 out of 10 game, you would expect me to say something like Shogun 2 Total War. Maybe you're not someone that plays Total War style games on PC, but that is a genuinely great game. I still go back and play it. I think that's a 10 out of 10. But if I were to say something like Muv-Luv Alternative, first off, most of you would be like, I don't know what that is. Unless maybe you watch the show on Crunchyroll. Because even though I think that is a 10 out of 10 visual novel, most people do not consider that a game at all. You can basically sit there, autoplay the whole thing, make a couple of, dialogue choices here and there. But, people would kind of raise an eyebrow and say, I don't think this is a legitimate thing to say. Do you even play games? And that's just how things are. When you are talking to the gamers at large, they expect you to be talking about games that have gameplay. And even though things like visual novels, or in this case, Mixtape, has some clicking or button presses that you need to do, it's not much. And a lot of people are going to say, hey, that's not a game. This should not be reviewed. This should be in its own category if you're going to talk about it. And in the most broadest terms, it does fall into the games category because, it's a game. You can play it on, Steam. You can play it on Xbox, whatever. But it's not really impressive in terms of like a lot of the gameplay. And the biggest part that I think everyone's really upset about is for things like visual novels and so forth, like even in Dispatch had, it was fine. A little overpriced for like the story that we got. But when we look at these games like visual novels or interactive movies, like you might call Mixtape, it's the story is really important. Story is supremely important. Your story has to be good. Part of why I love visual novels so much is because the only thing they can do is have a good story. If the story's not there, the whole thing's garbage. I can't be like, oh yeah, the gameplay was great, but the story was garbage, because there's no gameplay there. You just go through the story and you enjoy the story, or you hate the story, or whatever it may be. So when it comes to storytelling, sitting down for like a 40+ hour visual novel, that can be great. I personally enjoy it. Most people do not, but to each their own. And in this case, with Mixtape, we've got a game that is based around a bunch of pretentious teenage music snobs that really have no redeeming qualities about them. The whole thing is just around them being a bunch of rebellious teenagers when it's like, oh, my sister got into this, ultra fancy, ultra pretentious, like art school. And I'm going to go to this other place and like all this stuff. And the dad's like, no, I don't want you to be out partying. I want to actually have you to get an education and not just, go to college and be a worthless prick, because that's, what the kids are doing right now in the story. And the whole thing is just about them getting alcohol, going to a party they're not supposed to, and eventually burning a house down, which, not their fault, it's fireworks, whatever. But, the girl comes out and is like, this is what, Dad, if you don't let me do whatever I want, this is going to only be the beginning. And, as far as he sees it, he thinks his daughter's just burned this house down. And in modern terms, we would call that a mental health crisis. We would look at that person and say that person needs to be detained and sent for a mental health evaluation. But instead, with the story, it's just like, oh, yeah, your police officer dad's just like, oh, well, I guess we've got an understanding. Like, you get to go be like this awful human being and burn stuff down when you don't get your way. It's a terrible story. The whole thing is, pure garbage. There is no part of it where I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, at least that's redeeming or that's redeeming. Like, the whole story is just very unimpressive. But despite it being super unimpressive, you've got all these people for these places like IGN and so forth that are just like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I really resonated with these characters. And that's kind of where I went from being like, is this, the higher up saying this is ideologically agreeing with us, or is this them actually liking it? And they seem to genuinely, for some of these folks, really love the game. They're like, oh, I saw this and it's just, oh man, it's amazing just to hear me say these words. Just unbelievably insane. Because with this whole game, it's supposed to make you feel like you're in the 90s again, being a kid. As someone that was growing up in the 90s, nothing in that resonated with me because I was not some pretentious music snob teenager that was a failure. I was a pretentious anime and game snob teenager that was a failure. I know what failure looks like, and that's not my brand of failure. If they had been making like anime references or talking about like playing Halo or something, maybe I could be like, okay, yeah, I remember that era. But no, it was a bunch of just being totally miserable individuals that just wanted to drink, make a mess of blockbusters, and be like, I hate you, mom and dad, which all these people that are journalists that are just like, man, reminds me of my younger days too. It's so amazing. I genuinely think that they look at this and they're like, man, I wish I could have told my dad that I would have burned things down if they didn't let me do whatever I wanted to do. Like, it basically proves this thing that we've all been saying where it's like, these games journalists, they're not gamers. And if they're coming out and they're saying Mixtape is this amazing experience and it really resonated with them, it resonates with them because they're not gamers at all. They're just these insufferable failures that have grown up as failures and are like, man, all I want to do is really listen to music. I don't really want to play any of these like terrible games with these terrible gamers. Which we even had some journalists go and attack like Asmongold's fans to be like, oh man, these terrible people, they're all racist chud gamers, and gamers is a curse word, and I hate all these gamers. And he tags Asmongold like an idiot so that he can reply on his little safe space tweet. Absurd. What are you doing? Because the people that are playing, watching Asmongold genuinely, they're your core gamer base, whether you like it or not. You're going to have a lot of people that love video games in there, even though he does cover a lot of political content. So if you're going to go off and be like, oh, the Asmongold fans are total racist chuds, like they're the worst in the world. Like if you're a games journalist or someone that's targeting that, demographic at all, you shouldn't be attacking Asmongold fans. If you want to attack Asmongold, fine. He's an individual. He's got his opinions. You can go after him, whatever you want to do. But the people that watch him, a ton of people watch him. A lot of people don't agree with him. Fine. If you don't agree with him, it's up to you. But if you're someone that likes him and you're suddenly being called a name because, people are like, hey, you made a bad review for this game, which shouldn't even be called a game, which is fair. Because if they were making all sorts of reviews on other like visual novels or other things like that, we could all be like, okay, this is just part of their, visual novel collection. But I don't see them like really going over any other games that are like that. Like Dispatch is one thing, but like, it's more of a, what's that? The Walking Dead or whatever it was, that kind of style of gameplay where if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But they only cover these things that are like Western and not kind of like any other story games. So it's kind of hard to be like, oh, well, this is just, part of that catalog. I don't see them coming out and making a review for like the latest Neko Nyan title, Hold Me Tight All Night Oni-chan or anything like that, which like, honestly, we all know that if they were to like go over any kind of cute anime girl thing or anything like that, they'd be like, oh, this is like terrible and it's gross and you're a gooner if you do this, because of course you're a gooner if you play like, Stellar Blade, or you're terrible if you play, Black Myth Wukong because there's no women or whatever it might be. And they're going to go off and be like how terrible all these gamers are and how they're so gross and terrible. But meanwhile, you've got Mixtape where you've got a mini game where like, they're tongue kissing for teenagers and they're like, oh yeah, this is perfectly fine. These are the people that find offense with absolutely everything. And there's something where it's like, okay, if you just apply the exact same standards that you apply for every other game that you kind of drag through the mud, then you should be getting upset over this one thing. Personally, I don't care if they've got some mini game with like awkward kissing. It's a weird choice for them to make. It's a very artistically focused game that is not for me. But, you know, you make whatever you want to make. But if you were to look at all these journalists that were getting really upset over being like, oh, well, you know, Eve from Stellar Blade, she's not, you know, realistic at all, even though she was based off of a real person. Or if they'll point at games and be like, oh, these are all games that are built by men for men. And like, look at all this gooner content. And you'll find out that the CEO of these companies are like actual women that are like, oh, man, yeah, I'm going to make the lewdest pictures that I can to sell in these gotcha games. It is just totally divorced from reality when they look at some of these things like Mixtape, and they're like, oh, I'm willing to put aside all of the negative criticism, and I'm just going to give it a 10 out of 10. You know, if we were to look at this from like just a movie perspective, because that's all this really is, it's an interactive movie, and compare it to any other movie, it just doesn't stand up. Story's unimpressive. There's really nothing there. If I was looking at like a 90s movie, you had things like American Pie, where it was just those trashy teenage films that were fine. They were like, you know, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, depending on like what kind of mood you were in for, if you were the target audience. And you compare it to something like Mixtape, and it's just, I think it's like a 3 out of 10, maybe a 4 out of 10 at best. There's just nothing in there where it's like really amazing. And it does have a lot of good reviews. People are playing it. A lot of people are looking at like the Steam charts and they're like, look, it's only breaking like this amount of number. You need to keep in mind that like with Mixtape, since it's so short, you should basically be breaking it up every 3 hours for like the 24-hour chart. And then that's basically the number of people that are playing it throughout the day, not the high water marks, because, you know, it's just such a short game. And I would say, pointing to the final point of this whole thing, is this talk about, is it an indie game? Because with this game, they've got perpetual music licenses to all these really popular songs, which are going to cost a fortune because, you know, the publisher is one of those people that she's a girl failure that just has a bunch of daddy's money and she's just burning it, like just throwing it away on things. But there's an issue right now, I would say, that we can all agree with, that the indie title that we give to things is kind of vague. Because like when I think of indie, I'm thinking of like, you know, solo developer, solo published kind of stuff, like really small scale. But we've also got indie titles like Expedition 33, where they have a publisher that's putting in tens of millions of dollars into these games. And so we really need to, at some point, come up with some kind of distinction for what is indie, maybe break it into several territories to be like, this is indie self-published, you know, this is indie that's published by a studio with like a certain amount of money that might have been put in. I don't know how we're going to do it. I think that's largely a issue for like the Game Awards, because it's become a really broad term. Like almost all the good games that are coming out right now are indie games. Most of the AAA games are just terrible because of this. The studios are just bad. Like they're totally rotten. So this is technically an indie game if we're going to go for it. They have their own thing that they're doing for their game to try and get it with their, you know, creative vision. More power to them. I have nothing against the devs of this game at all. I'm not a fan of the publisher, but I'm not going to attack the publisher either. They're just, you know, doing their own thing. All my complaints for Mixtape is just that it's a really mediocre game, and we have all these games journalists that are just going after people that are like, oh, well, no, it's so amazing. You got to play it. It's a must play. And it's just not that good of a game. That's the whole thing. The whole game is just so pretentious and unimpressive. And the people that it really resonated with are not the kind of people that gamers want to be around at all. Like if you get someone that's coming out and they're really passionate about games, that's one thing. You get someone that's coming in that's like, oh, I'm actually, you know, I'm going to become this like really, I don't even remember what the title she wanted to, like the character that was like, oh, I'm going to go work I'll have this special music title where I get to do all these magical things and I'm going to have all this authority and everyone's going to think I'm so cool. And it's like, who is this? This is not the kind of character that you're going to want to root for. Any of them. None of the characters are like, man, I really like that character. And if you like any of them, like, what the hell, dude? They're all garbage. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, I kind of rambled here, but there's like a lot of really random things with this whole Mixtape conversation because it's just such a bad game or story or an interactive movie, whatever you want to call it. But that's it for today. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you all again in a future video. Farewell.